Hello, loved ones. This is Matt Stevens, and this is the My Sober Addiction podcast. I have a word for you. It's superposition. That sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? I think so. Yes, Matt, that sounds pretty cool, but what is superposition? Well, dear loved one, I am so glad you asked. Superposition says that particles can exist in multiple states at once until they are observed. That's when they collapse into a single state, meaning it is a waveform until it is observed. And meaning until it is observed, it's a possibility. It's in all places at once, meaning it could be here, it could be there, it could be that, it could be this. Until we observe it, observation meaning focused attention, then it is a possibility that could be anything. Now, I'm not trying to get all sciencey on you. However, I do have a point. So, observation is focused attention. What we focus on comes into existence. What is not observed is only a possibility of everything that is possible. So, we can consciously choose to focus our attention or not, and when we do choose to focus our attention, reality comes into place. Or, more specifically, when we do focus our attention, that which is not becomes is. Now, a perfect example of this is the double slit experiment. It was an experiment that was done that proved that unobserved objects are a waveform and observed objects become particles. In the double slit experiment, they had a back wall and then a front wall. And in the front wall, there were two slits. And they began firing particles through the slits. And they left it, and then they came back later and observed. They expected there to be a line here on the back wall and a line there on the back wall, indicating that the particles went through each slit and made a subsequent line on the back wall. That's not what happened. He created what they call an interference pattern, which is a wave pattern. The particles hit in all spots in the wall, indiscriminately and unpredictably. So then, these physicists decided, well, how did that happen? So they decided to observe it. So they put up a camera or some kind of indicator that shows whether or not the particle went through the top slit or the bottom slit. And they turned the machine on again, and it began firing particles towards the front wall that had the two slits, went away, and came back and looked, and lo and behold, exactly what had been predicted is what had happened. The particles did not form a wave pattern this time, yet they did what would have been predicted, which was two lines on the back wall from the subsequent slits in the front wall. Now, dear listener, thinking that the particles are just playing tricks on them, they decided, well, how about we try this? We act as if we are observing the particles going through the slits, but we won't. We'll go unplug the indicator or the camera, the thing that's making the observation. So they unplug it, leaving it still there. They unplug it and they go away and they come back again. And what happened? You guessed it. A wave pattern formed again, an interference pattern, something very unpredictable. So what happened was the particles, when observed, formed something very predictable, something concrete, something that is this or that, to either the top slit or the bottom slit. When it was not observed, it formed a wave pattern. It could have been anything. It could have been that or this or here or there. So I know, what's up with all this theoretical and or quantum physics talk, Matt? Well, I am very aware of the fact that I can get very woo-woo, weird. And in my last episode, I kind of did that. I got a little out there. But I like to kind of reel it back in a little bit and show that a lot of the things that we consider to be woo-woo or metaphysical can very much be proved with science. So what the double slit experiment teaches us is something rather amazing. It teaches us how important perception is. Now, this double slit experiment is very much a mystery to physics. In fact, if anybody listening to this can explain it, you probably have a Nobel Prize waiting for you. But to those of us who really don't care about explaining physics' greatest questions, we just want to know how does it apply to our life. How can we use this bit of information? And what it teaches us is that perception is everything. Nikola Tesla said, "The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than all the previous centuries of its existence." That's quite a claim, and I believe it to be true. Another experiment was done, and this one's done a lot more recently. It was done with a random number generator. They had a computer, I believe it was in New York State. Like I said, I'm not a science guy. I'm spiritual. I like to take the things we learn from science and apply it. Had a computer that was a random number generator. Now, I know it can be debated whether or not it was truly random or not. For the sake of this, we're going to go with it was random. Because I'm willing to bet that anybody that would try to find some pattern in it probably would not. Now, in this experiment, they took a group of people scattered out around the world and told them all at a particular date and time to start focusing on particular numbers to try to influence this computer that was perhaps thousands of miles away to not be so random, to generate the numbers that they were thinking of. Well, at the end of the experiment, they went back and they looked, and it actually happened. The numbers that the people around the world were focusing on was actually generated more often than the ones they were not focusing on, which means that focused attention can create reality from something that was considered to be completely random. That's another rather amazing example of how we are able to manipulate energy. This is all very encouraging to those of us who wish to learn how to be creators of our own reality, to learn our true selves, and to then ultimately, of course, be examples for others. We can start the snowball rolling. You know, in the book I've been reading, Conversations with God, it refers to snowflakes a lot, and how each snowflake is beautiful and unique. So we can start the snowball rolling. We can be the shining examples to the rest of them as far as what is possible, how we can show people the way out of the muck, because a lot of people, addicts particularly, find that they have dug themselves in such a hole that they can't find their way out, or they think, what's the use? So that puts us in a position to do two things. One, have an amazing life for ourselves, and who wouldn't want to do that, right? But also, we can be examples to them. We can start the snowball rolling. So if we become great examples to them, then they can become examples to others, and it gets bigger and bigger. And before long, as a collective, we all have an amazing existence together. Not that we have to have it together, because we are individuals, but we can lead others. But first, we must realize our connection to divinity. Yes, divinity meaning the Creator, God, the universe. We must realize our connection to the divinity, and we must get over our fear of punishment. Human suffering is not divine. In fact, it's the opposite. Anyone who thinks that we are here to suffer and die, and then maybe we'll get a reward for that by going to heaven, is probably pretty disillusioned. I believe our own belief system, our own faith, dictates to us what happens to us in the future, and future is a relative term. And I'm aware that most likely most people who listen to this are Christian. And even Jesus said it himself in the Bible. Jesus never healed anyone. Oh yes, I just said that. Jesus never healed anyone. If you don't believe me, go and read it more carefully for yourself. Jesus said, "Thy faith has made thee whole. Thy faith has saved thee. According to your faith be it unto you." Now, what part of that was Jesus healing anyone? It wasn't. He told them that they were healing themselves based on their own faith to do so. You know, all religions, all philosophies teach this same principle. All of them. Hindus, they teach the same principle. Buddhists especially teach this principle. And we already know that Christianity, Judaism, they do. All religious philosophies teach this principle. That by our faith, we are healed, or we build our own reality. Whatever it is that we are trying to accomplish, be it good or bad, that or this, whatever our focused attention goes on, is what will happen. For example, people have near-death experiences that are Christian, come back and say that they saw Jesus or their relatives. Then you can take a Hindu who has a near-death experience and they come back and they say they saw Krishna. Muslims can have a near-death experience and come back and say that they were greeted by Muhammad. Who's right and who's wrong? It's based on what their belief system is. It's based on what they believe to be true. Please remember, dear listener, we are not here to judge others based on their faith. We are only here to learn what we can learn from other faiths and apply it to our lives. We don't have to agree philosophically with others in order to learn something from them. That would be very, egotistical and naive. Just for one more minute, let me get back to this sciencey stuff. When the nucleus in an atom is magnified, deeply magnified, we see that it is an oscillating field, just pure, raw energy, with no physicality. Everything is mostly empty space. In fact, if you were to take all 7 billion people on Earth and cram them down to where there is no empty space in between each atom in their body, we could fit every single one of the 7 billion people on Earth inside of a coffee cup. That tells you how much empty space is in an atom. But even more so than that, if you just keep magnifying down into it, we discovered that even the nucleus of that atom, the core of it, is just raw energy. It's an oscillating field, or we could call it a wave pattern, much like in the double slit experiment. It's a field of possibility. So, knowing that science tells us that everything at its core is just energy, I'm going to go back to the part in Conversations with God, an Uncommon Dialogue by Neil Donald Walsch that I read in last episode, and reiterate. And this is God speaking in the book. Emotion is energy in motion. When you move energy, you create effect. If you move enough energy, you create matter. Matter is energy conglomerated, moved around, shoved together. If you manipulate energy long enough in a certain way, you get matter. Every master understands this law. It is the alchemy of the universe. It is the secret of all life. This is great news for us because it tells us whatever we choose to focus on is what we will perceive as our reality. One of my favorite quotes is from Edgar Cayce: "What a man thinks continually, he becomes." And ladies, I'm sorry, that's just the time he was living in. What a person, let's rearrange that. What a person thinks continually, that person becomes. I was like, oh God, what I'm going to say here. Which then reminds me of another great one, Earl Nightingale. And I don't even know when this thing was published. It was 40s, 50s, 60s, somewhere. It's called The Strangest Secret. And it's about 32, 33 minutes long. It's a recording. I remember my grandparents had it, Hazel and Kenneth, had it on a vinyl LP. And I don't think I ever heard it at that point. I do just remember, maybe I did. I don't know. I just remember seeing it. And it, it's a black and white picture of this old dude clearly from the 50s probably. And you can look it up anywhere. It's called The Strangest Secret. And in it, it says, we become what we think about most of the time. Which is great or bad, depending upon what we're thinking about. And that's why it's so important that we focus our attention on what we want to become rather than what we don't want. And whether we like it or not, we are where we are currently by decisions that we made. And I know nobody has chosen to be where we are right now. Not exactly, right? We have chosen to be here based on the decisions that we've made. I'm aware if you're in a very bad point in your life right now, you're probably thinking to yourself, Matt, I didn't choose this. I would never choose this. I get it. But you are where you are based on choices that you've made. We usually know the consequence, good or bad, of any decision that we make. Good news is we can always choose to make better decisions. We can always choose to focus on making ourselves better. We can choose a better life. Now, going back to the book that I've been reading, Conversations with God and a Common Dialogue by Neil Donald Walsch. Chapter 7 starts out with Mr. Walsh saying to God, life is so scary. and so confusing. I wish things could be more clear. God responds, there is nothing scary about life if you are not attached to results. And then Mr. Walsch says, you mean if I don't want anything? God replies, that's right. Choose, but don't want. That's a pretty compelling statement. Choose, but don't want. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, further into that chapter a little bit, where it says, this is the process of self-realization, about which Eastern mystics have written. Eastern mystics meaning Taoists, Buddhists, Hindus. So, this is God speaking, of course. This is the process of self-realization about which Eastern mystics have written. It is the process of salvation in which much Western theology has devoted itself. Kind of got two little points there. For one, it shows where we can learn from other philosophies. As a Christian or as a Muslim or a Hindu, doesn't matter. That doesn't mean that we can't look to other philosophies and find bits of that we can use in our life. Spiritual teaching is spiritual teaching. Salvation is something else. I mean, if you believe that you must do this for salvation, well, that's your belief system. And I'm not here to poo-poo anybody's party. Anyway, so it continues with saying, this is a day-to-day, hour-to-hour, moment-to-moment act of supreme consciousness. It is a choosing and a re-choosing every instant. It is ongoing creation. Conscious creation. Creation with a purpose. It is using the tools of creation we have discussed and using them with awareness and sublime intention. So it goes on further to explain that we don't need to focus on what the past is. We only need to focus on now. We don't really need to focus on the future because that would be to be expecting some outcome. We just need to choose our life now. Every moment of every day. Now. That's all we've got is now. Speaking of Eastern mystics, Eastern philosophers, Lao Tzu said, if you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you are at peace, you are living in the moment. So we can't focus on the past or the future. I think that quote is very accurate. If we're focused on the past, and we're probably something about it bothers us. And we might have good memories, but we don't live there. Depression will hold us into the past. Things that we are not happy about. And anxiety will have us living in the future. How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? Constantly be worrying about things that are on the horizon. That's anxiety. And those are things that are out of our control. Because we can't control the future and we can't control the past. We can only control now. So we can focus our lives now on having an amazing life. And if you want to put a point on that future that we're talking about, let's put a number on it. Let's say 2030. I don't know. Depending upon when you're listening to this. But let's say in 2030, you're really worried about that date. Okay. Well, you're anxious about it. And that's not good. Because that's a far off date that may never even come. In your reality, in your perception. So what's the point in focusing on it and worrying about it? All you can really do is worry about now. I'm having a great life now. What we do know is what we have observed, what we have focused our attention on, what we think about is what we become. Let's start focusing on being good things. I am, and God showed us this, the Creator, the universe, whoever, showed us this, the great I am. The great I am is all that there is. So when you use those words, magic can happen for you. I am happy, healthy, wealthy, and free. And that's ultimately the goal of everybody, really, is to be happy, healthy, wealthy, and free. So claim it for yourself. I am happy, healthy, wealthy, and free. Now, if you want to get more specific than that, if you want to be a teacher, I am a teacher. And then when that far off point does finally get here, 2030, at that point it will then be your now. And if we have been conscious creators up to that point, we most likely will be living a pretty amazing life at that point. See So if we focus on it, we'll most likely cause it to happen. So we should focus on now, always now. That way when that gets to be this, we'll be in a much better place because we're always focusing on a much better now. And I realize that sounds like some pie in the sky, manifestation, bullshit, whatever you want to call it. Not everybody's ready for this. However, I believe if you have listened to this podcast and you're continuing to listen to it, then you're probably with me. Now, is my life ideal? No, it's not. But it is my own creation, and I am in much better shape now than I was. By a lot of people's standards, I'm living the dream, and I appreciate that. I do. I often talk about how much we've got to show gratitude for the things that we do have. Because really, compared to a lot, and I don't say we should be comparing to anyone. However, compared to your own self in 6 months ago or 2 years ago or whenever, we're probably in a lot better shape than we have been. And then some people like to blame it on outside conditions. If you're constantly looking out for the answer, then the only thing that's going to make you happy is something from out there. Why don't you go inside and find the answers, right? Because I realize there's a lot of bad things going on in the world, things that we don't want to be happening. And I recently got into a discussion, we'll say, with some people who were talking about like the law of assumption and how we can assume the life that we want. Just assume it. Thing is, that's something we have to focus on very intently. And it's not something we can do part-time. We have to do it all the time. In the ever-present now. But anyway, in this discussion, somebody was kind of being a smartass, I guess. And it's like, well, then if that's the case, then I'm just going to assume there is no war in Ukraine or in Israel. I guess that's a nice thought, right? But that is the job of the collective, the human collective. We, as a group, as humanity, we can manifest things such as war and or peace. So when the person was kind of being a little bit of a smarty pants and was talking about, well, I'll just assume there is no war in Ukraine or Israel. We can't do that. Not as an individual. But what we can do, and this is the point that I made, I says, we can't really do that as individuals. We need to convince a lot of people, the collective, the human conscious collective. We need to convince a lot of people that we do create our own reality. So that way we can get rid of those bad things that happen in the world. But we're not there yet. However, we are creating the snowball. You, an individual, perfectly beautiful snowflake. I also am one. Everyone we see is one. We get enough of that going, that big snowball effect keeps collecting. If I grab up 2 or 3, you grab up 2 or 3, all of those 2 or 3 go grab up 2 or 3. You understand the pyramid scheme thing? We've all been through that, right? Anyway, but that's how this works. We live by example. We show other people that they can do it too. Get people interested in you. Get people interested in like, wow, I remember when you were down here. How did you get up there? And then you've got an amazing story to tell, don't you? Well, I did it by fill in the blanks. Like with me with this podcast. I've decided I want to be a podcaster. I'm not trying to be a podcaster. I am a podcaster. That's something I'm hoping to be. I'm just being it. Now, in this moment, I am a podcaster, and I love it. Now, the level of my success, that's something else. That's just that's in my own observation. That's in my own perception. Whatever you decide you want to be is what you will be. When you make the decision, this is what I am. And I don't want to hear any smart-ass comments about how, oh, okay, I decide I'm a multimillionaire, man. Well, there's my bank account, still empty. Right? But to know that everything exists right now. There is no time. There is no space. Uh-oh, did I just step in it there? I may have. What I mean is, reality is not real at all. The physical is a manifestation of the collective. It's an illusion. We were created in the mind of the Creator, and we exist there. And in the mind of the Creator, time and space don't really exist. It's something that we have in this 3D reality as units of measurement, and they are necessary because we do have beginnings and ends. But out there in the spiritual realm, no time or space, no distance, doesn't make sense for there to be, right? Why would there be? If there is no beginning or end, there's no way to break it apart and measure it. So, while we're here, I'm encouraging all of you, let's just have fun with it, right? Let's learn a lot about ourselves on a spiritual level. Figure out who you really are. I mean, you're a part of God. What we've come to understand is that God, the Creator, the universe, became conscious, became aware of itself, and decided, I would like to experience things. Not just conceptually, not just in the mind, to actually experience it, to go out and be it. At that point, Creator started divvying itself up into billions, maybe trillions of parts, and going out and having experiences. And each one of them makes up the whole. Each one of those parts, you and me, we make up the whole. The whole is all there is. So we're coming out here and we're having experiences that we call life, and we can make it what we want. So why would you not want to make it something awesome? You probably have lived multiple lifetimes or some kind of existence, some kind of incarnation. And maybe those weren't all that great. Maybe, just maybe. There's lots of maybes, right? But what we know is that we are here now, and we are creators. We are made in the image of, right? Everything we do is creative. So why not take this time and live amazing lives and be examples to others? Anyway, I'm very thankful for you. I do appreciate you, dear listener. If you would please rate this podcast, maybe give it a little review. Unless you got something bad to say, maybe not then. I'm kidding. But whatever you want. I love you, and I will be back. Thank you.